Hey,
Hi,
how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. We are all so excited.
I'm so excited to talk. I feel like I haven't talked about Radically Content because it's like, there's other stuff that has come
Yeah,
out. So I'm excited to jump back in because I need a refresher on
yeah.
Radically Content. So I'm so excited.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously you have so much exciting stuff going on, which I like can't wait for you to share with people. I think one thing that I definitely got a kick out of is when we announced the book, having several people um write it, like respond to the newsletter announcement saying that they know you through your fiction work and that they hadn't known that you had written nonfiction. And so they expressed so much excitement
That's
that,
cool.
like they knew the name and were excited to delve into like new work from you. And so I think it's, um, I was very excited, and I know a lot of people were too. And so I'll start by giving you a brief introduction. I'm sure everyone will be joining and everyone who will be watching the replay. As I mentioned, that a bunch of people, submit questions and watch after the fact, know who you are, but nonetheless, I'll give you kind of a brief introduction. So, we are so lucky for our May Wellbeing Book Club to have Jamie Varon, who wrote Radically Content. And Jamie is a best-selling author, a novelist, and truly a creative force whose work has resonated with so many people. Like I said, she's the author of our May Wellbeing Book Club book, Radically Content, which blends memoir, social insight, and practical tools really to challenge kind of the hustle culture and invite us to find like peace and purpose by kind of stepping off the hamster wheel of life. And beyond Jamie's writing, she's a designer, a branding expert, a course creator, and I feel like people really resonate with how authentic you are and the ability that you have to just like connect deeply with people through your vulnerability and your insight and your your willingness to call out parts of culture that are destructive, that I think for a lot of people they just kind of let happen silently without any kind of social commentary, even if they realize that they're destructive. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I mean, it's just it's a pleasure to be here, and I mean, it means the world to me that anyone would choose me for a book club, but this is a special one just because, it's so focused. Your book club is so focused on well-being and mental health, which is just such a big part of everything that I do, from the posts that I put on Instagram to, even my fiction. Every single character is going through some sort of, my main characters usually go through some sort of mental health thing, and that's sort of the narrative
Yeah,
journey. So this is so important to me, and it makes me feel like I'm with my people we think about this stuff.
yeah,
I'm like, we need to keep talking about this kind of stuff. We can't just sweep it all under the
totally.
rug.
Totally. And the genesis of this book club, which was now over 3 years ago, was I in my free time like run a free system of helping people across the US and Canada find mental health care. So I have kind of a system, and so many people were writing into me saying I either don't have access to mental health care or don't have the time for it, but are there books you can point me to that will help me
Mm,
out? And that is how this book club started. And I think what Radically Content does so well is normalize the struggles and make it clear that on the outside, like you don't have to be suffering so apparently to people
right.
to be struggling. And I think that's the truth, is most people suffer silently, right? And that you do a great job of normalizing what it can be like to struggle and recognizing that it's hard to break out of it, but that it's possible. And I think so many people wrote in saying how much hope you gave them. which I think is a really important thing, especially during a time like this when we're in such a mental health crisis. That feeling of hope is perhaps the most important thing, when it comes to seeking help and admitting, that you want to make a change.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes from the fact that like there have been so many times in my life that I have not had that hope,
Yeah.
that I truly felt like there is there's really no reason to do the work or invest in myself because I don't see how things get better. And I think for me, my heart is just in helping people have hope in ways that are going to be different than I think other people use their voice. I like to use it to show more compassion and understanding towards where people are coming from and what they're suffering with, or what they, one thing that I've been told that I really treasure is that I'm able to name things that people don't know
Yeah.
that they're
Yeah.
feeling, which is, that's so important to me because I think that's such, as like that's the first step. That's such an important step,
Yeah.
That's why with Radically Content, I focused a lot on that awareness and naming
Yeah.
things because I felt that that takes away the sting, like almost 80% of the way,
Totally.
is being able to say, oh my God, I get this, or someone else gets this. It's not just me, because so much of mental health, we suffer privately and we
Yeah.
imagine and overblow, and we blow it out to the point where we think nobody else has ever felt this way. And therefore, I'm watching other people, especially now with the way social media is, you're
Yeah.
watching other people and thinking they don't struggle,
Yeah.
they don't feel this way.
Yeah.
So it's just me. Therefore, there is no hope for change because they're not as bad as me, or they're not as this. And so I've always just felt that one of my superpowers is like, I'm kind of shameless in vulnerability. There's some things, of course, I have privacy. There's things that I don't share. But when it comes to like my emotional state, or
Yeah.
if I'm like having a self-doubt moment, of which there are many, I'm like, I'm just going to say it, I
Yeah.
don't know. It makes people feel less alone. And I'd rather people feel less alone than to present some picture perfect image that
Totally.
I'm like, I get that gets you to a certain place, but I'm like, that's not the place I want to get to. So that's not really valuable to me.
And I think it's so important. And as you said, I think naming it is so important because I think a lot of people have thoughts or feelings and don't know how to put words to it. And I think you do a great job of giving people language so that they can better synthesize what it is
Mm-hmm.
that what it is that they're experiencing. I'm curious. Sorry, go ahead.
No, 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 you go. Yeah, I was just agreeing with you. Yeah.
You shared from the start of the book that you started on anti-anxiety medication in 2016, and that was a big turning point in your journey to reaching radical contentment. And through radically content, you talk about the promises that you made to yourself and the new perspectives that you or adopted along the way. I'm curious how how did you shift from being someone that you describe as being prone to complaints and dissatisfaction and negativity to someone who's actively cultivating the happiness and contentment? I mean, you provide so much wisdom, but aside from just deciding if I'm going to start the anti-anxiety medication, I'm also going to, you know, take these extra steps. How did you make that switch?
Yeah, I think it started with, I remember, I don't know if it, I don't can't remember the exact day, but I remember there was a day where I just said to myself, I was like, I'm not gonna be happy if I keep doing what I'm doing, which was prolonging my happiness, trying to earn it, trying to achieve my way to it, thinking that it's just on the other side of the body, the career, the dream, this, everything is, dream
Yeah.
body, dream career, dream person, dream relationship, dream this. It's like this promise of the happily ever after. And I was just very disillusioned by that promise because I had gotten things that I thought were supposed to make me happy, and they didn't they didn't like, actually deliver on that promise. And so I was like, well, huh, what do I do
Yeah.
now? And I really got to a point where I was like, honestly, the question was like, how do I get happy?
Yeah.
Like it was as simple as that, because I thought, I thought, of course I don't get to be happy now. I'm not in my dream
Right.
everything yet. So
Right.
I felt I didn't deserve it. And so I said
Right.
to myself, I'm like, but how do I figure out how to be happy like right now in
Yeah.
my current circumstances? Like, say nothing ever changes. I am
Yeah.
this way. How do I get happy? And
Yeah.
that was the question that started a lot, because it wasn't it brought me to the moment, which was very important. It brought me to um, reminding myself that, these are daily actions. So I started, like I say in the book, I got very consistent about some routines and rituals that
Yeah.
I was like, I'm just going to try this. It really was experimentation in a way, because I was like, well, this wasn't working how I was living before. So now, well, let me try something else. And like, I'll say that the anti-anxiety medication, now that I'm almost 10 years out from that, like that's
Yeah.
crazy. That's nuts. Like 2016 to now, it's like, oh my gosh, we're
Yeah.
almost in
Yeah.
2026. But now that it's like 10 years out, I'm like, that was obviously a catalyst for me. And I'm saying I am a big supporter of
Yeah.
medication. It's just, for me, that was in a way, because the dosage was so low, that I'm like,
Yeah.
this almost acted as a placebo to me,
Yeah.
where it was like, of course, I'm sure it had an effect, but it was really that I'm caring about my mental health, my well-being, my physical being, more than let me try to achieve myself into it. Like, if I just
Yeah.
hustle hard enough, if I just finally force these achievements into my life, then I'll be happy. And I think that was my line in the sand to myself. I was like, no, you don't get to
Right.
do that anymore.
Right.
Figure out how to be happy now. And, at first it wasn't even happy. I think it was like, let me just figure out how to wake up and like be okay with myself, because I
Yeah.
was waking up every day in just this terrible sinking
Yeah.
anxiety. And, I just couldn't keep going like that. And so that's what started it. And, it was so much less like, of course, I took action, but I think just getting curious about all the blocks that I had, like all these like roadblocks that I had put up, saying, you don't get this and you don't get this. And I'd be like, finally started asking, I'm like, why not?
Yeah.
Like, why do I have to wait? Like, why do I have to wait to have a certain body to have the life that I want? Why do I have to wait to have a certain job in order to feel satisfied with the work that I'm doing? Like, why am I constantly looking for permission to like value myself?
Yeah.
And I think asking those hard questions, which, I mean, let's be honest, like, there's a lot of people who they will take the actions, they'll do, but asking those questions is where all they can't do. They won't
Yeah.
ask those questions of themselves. They won't ask themselves, what is it within me that is so craving this, that I think I need it in order to be whole? Like, where is my inner sense of worth? Where is something that nobody can take from me, whether I fail or lose or win or anything?
Yeah.
And I don't think we ask those questions of ourselves enough. And so that was the driving force behind writing the book, and all of my work from that point. It was, let's ask ourselves the questions that we're clearly so afraid to ask, and let's get out of the autopilot where we're just going. And then what was really fascinating was, I had this idea for a book. I started writing all this stuff. And then in the midst of a pandemic where everyone
Right.
slowed down, I wrote a book about how I had slowed down
Right.
years prior. And I was like, yeah, I get it. Like the timing was really surreal because I was like, I wrote this book and formulated these ideas in a time when hustle culture was in, I mean, we were all obsessed, to a certain degree. And I was like, this is not it, like, I mean, to a certain extent, I thought maybe I'm wrong, maybe like all these people are secretly really happy. And then you find out like everyone's super burned out and this wasn't the promise. And so that was a really wild thing because I felt that at the time of formulating Radically Content, it was really like fresh and new. And now I'm like, a lot of people are talking about this, which is great. A lot of people are talking about the same concepts. And I'm sure and I know they were before this too. It's not just me. I mean, there's always been a lot of focus on certain things, but I'm just saying that this specific thing with the hustle culture and then to have seen it change so much since then is really interesting because I do think we had an awakening around that and how little it was actually serving. Like, I think we've allowed ourselves to actually think about like, maybe success isn't just money, cars, the house, maybe like it's about how we feel in our lives, to me, that has always mattered the most. Like I remember even having, like when I was doing design work, I was a web designer for a very long time, branding expert. And I remember I would let go of clients who they weren't a fit for me. And I would tell my mom and she'd be like, how could you do that? That's money. And I'm like, yeah, but how I feel while I do the work and what this relationship will require, that's more important to me. And she was like, I don't know. She was really skeptical of that. Like, a lot of people were. But anyway, so that's kind of always been my thing. But I was also very, very entrenched in the idea that my happiness and fulfillment must come from external means.
Yeah.
And that to me was the thing driving my constant dissatisfaction and unhappiness and anxiety. Because if you feel that way and then everything you do is never enough, of course you're going to feel anxious, because you never feel safe or worthy or valuable. So it's just like, yeah, of course I'm going to feel that way.
And I think, you just alluded to the I'll be happy when. And I always find it so interesting with the book club and people writing in questions to see if, as I'm reading, I'm like putting Post-it notes on certain pages and making all these notes, but when curating the list of questions, I really try to like derive it from the members of the book club. And so I always get a kick out of seeing if what has really resonated with them is also what's resonated with me. And so many people wrote in about how much the I'll be happy when section resonated with them. And you described that mindset as a kind of escape. So kind of a way to delay contentment for some imagined future. And you just talked about it. Why do you think so many of us fall into that pattern? And what helped you begin to move past it, aside from realizing that it took you away from achieving happiness in the present?
Well, I think it's so tantalizing. It's a fantasy, it's, and I think there's multiple reasons why we do it. First, we recognize that the effort towards a dream is boring and tedious, and therefore the belief that one day we'll do it it's the same belief that we do, I'll start exercising on Monday, because we think our Monday self is somehow going to be, it's going to feel easier and more motivated. And it's like, the truth is the Monday self doesn't, it's just you on a Monday. But we love the idea of some future version of us being more fulfilled, more at ease. And we don't always love the fact that might require a significant amount of effort to do that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the first thing, of just how daunting the effort that is required to make changes of any kind. And I also think that it is an escape in that if our life hasn't gone the way that we imagined it would, which many of us, it doesn't,
Right.
then you have to pivot and, you try to stay on course, and then the course changes in some way, life intervenes. It can be a way to make ourselves feel better about what we're not doing to make change. And it also, it gives us a sense of productive happiness in the moment. Like, one day I'll be this person. And I just also think in general, we get fed a lot about the one day. So we see people winning the Grammy and they seem so happy, or they get the thing that they've always, they're celebrating the New York Times bestseller list, and they the book deal, the this. And so it's like, that feels like an explosion of happiness. And as we know, real life, of which everyone has to endure it, it can be the day-to-day, you're going to get bananas. You got things to do. You got to sleep. You got to eat. You got to do your walks or do your exercise. I mean, it's like caring for yourself. There's just a lot of all right, I got to do this again, like dinner again. And I think we see these magical moments, and we celebrate the magical moments so much. We're so addicted to them. I mean, movies, they're just like, that's the end. That's when they fulfill everything. We don't see that it was a long road. Sometimes maybe we do, but often when we're watching someone's highlight reel, we don't know their long road. And so we think our long road is longer and they must be getting something. And then we also don't see what comes after, which is the person that just won the Grammy goes home and they're just home, Like, I remember reading something about Matt Damon when he won the Academy Award for Good Will Hunting. And he said, I'm so grateful that I won this early on in my career so that I wouldn't have to care about ever winning this again, because it doesn't really mean anything. He was like, now I know that it was momentary, And so we forget how momentary it is. And that's why I think it's so alluring. It's the promise of something exciting, and it might, we have this idea that once we hit a certain point, that doubt that we deal with, or the growing pains we have to deal with on the way, it's all going to go away. Then I'll be so confident. Once I get the book deal, then I'll believe, once I get this. And it's a way to sort of avoid the sticky, hard work of feeling that in the moment of like, well, can you feel worthy if you don't get that? And can you be proud of yourself on the way to that? And those are harder things, because it's entrenched in our mind that we have to earn our worth. We have to earn our value. We have to earn even the right to feel good. Somehow, we're not allowed. Look at the way that laziness in some way, or unproductive, or, not being productive enough, it's so demonized, because we're supposed to earn the right. And so all of that put together makes, pick your poison, or pick this elixir that you think. And I think all of that contributes to a belief that I'll be happy when, and also it is exciting when your dreams happen, but anyone who's on that path knows how fleeting it is. And a lot of the things that feel really good sustainably are not those big hit moments. And so I think it's kind of balancing all of that, in that, sure, go after your dreams. I mean, that was really important for me in Radically Content. I never wanted to, felt like self-help out there. Siri was asking me to answer it. Okay. Siri, not now. So, I a lot of self-help out there where it was either like, here's how to crush it in life
Yeah.
always, constant productivity, or it's like, here's how to totally abstain from everything. And I was like, yeah, neither of those are going to work for me. Like, I want a balanced life. I want to still have big dreams, but I don't want to prolong all my happiness until the big dreams happen. So yeah, I think I when I discovered my own fascination with the I'll be happy win, like it's a version of the grass is greener, but a little different. And this obsession with the future being something better than right now, and meaning that I can't do anything right now to feel better. It has to happen in the future. When I when I hit on that in my own life, I was like, oh my God. I mean, I think that chapter is probably what I built the whole book around.
Yeah.
Because I was like, it doesn't surprise me that resonates a
Yeah.
lot, because I'm like, yeah, when I hit on this in my own life, it was so eye-opening to me. It changed everything for me,
Yeah.
because I was like, well, I can't do that anymore. It's like, you can't unring the bell. I was
Right.
like, I can't do that. It's harmful to myself.
Right.
I'm going to miss my whole life for this.
Yeah.
And then, since then, having had so many amazing things happen in my life that I didn't realize were going to happen, and then really recognizing how fleeting those moments are, while exciting, while amazing, I still return to my life. I still have to do the things. And I think the balance between the simple and the extraordinary, if that's what you dream of, that is the key to me, and
Yeah.
never giving too much weight to either of them.
Yeah. I think that's a really important balance. And I think one thing that's interesting is that when you wrote the book, like you talk about social media and the impact of social media. I feel like social media has just continued to evolve. And I think that the I'll be happy when has expanded now, not to just be thinking about our future selves or our, like, in our mind, our future selves. But I think social media has now become a place to fuel this I'll be happy when people are um, consuming content that shows only part of who someone is. And I think an idealized piece of who someone is. And so I feel like that idea of I'll be happy when has taken on a whole new meaning in recent years with social media.
Oh my God. I could do like an updated version,
Yeah.
because social media at the time I was like, whoa, this is rough. But then TikTok hit the scene, and I
Yeah.
was like, oh my gosh, like TikTok is so rough.
Yeah.
Like, it has, I'm sure, I'm sure there are people that have gotten a lot of value out of TikTok, but what it is
Yeah.
doing to the mental health of
Yeah.
people, young people especially, the numbers don't lie. I mean, what it's doing. And so
Yeah.
now it's beyond the I'll be happy when. I think it is like, I'll be happy when I have absolute perfection.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not even just perfection. It's like the right shoes, the right clothes, the right hair, the right face, the right this, the right everything. And there's really there's no ability to be outside of that. Like, it's like you got to conform to be accepted. You got to do the
Yeah.
same exact trends. You have to say the right things. You have to do the right things. That's what they're rewarding. That's what you're getting
Yeah.
engagement from. And to me, I'm like, not only is this hurting creativity very
Yeah.
clearly, but it's not, it's flattening us,
Yeah.
and then making us believe that if we get to the right destination, the right restaurant, the right shoes, the right this, and then it has to change so we can continuously
Yeah.
keep up. And it's like, you're no longer prolonging it for the future, you're just prolonging it forever,
Yeah.
because it'll continuously change. And I have tried to figure out how to speak up about social media more. But it's like people are really defensive
Yeah.
about social media for some reason.
Yeah.
I think because of maybe the pandemic, people really did find community online, and they might be forgetting that that's not really community.
Right.
Like finding people that say the same words as you, use the same trends as you, dress the same as you. Like that's not really community.
Yeah.
That's just the in group. And then, and so I'm like, we're really losing sight of what community is, what real sharing is, what authenticity is, the value of allowing for like real expression of ourselves without being afraid that we're not saying it the right way or looking the right way or doing it the right way. Like we're going to get to a point where like everyone has the same face and the same look and the same
Yeah.
everything, that we'll have lost something very essential. It's complicated, and I do think there's even more so such an idealized, because of like day in the life TikToks and,
Yeah.
things where, someone's life seems very like regimented, or, they're in a socioeconomic bracket that's so different from yours, but
Yeah.
they're presenting it as very like, relatable. And,
Yeah.
there's a lot that has happened since I wrote the book, in the sense of social media sort of doubling down on almost every single thing that I wrote about in the book. I'm like, wow, it somehow didn't progress in a positive direction. It
Yeah.
somehow got worse, where like someone can get canceled by in the drop of a hat, and hate spreads faster than love, and outrage is currency, and the comparison is beyond. I mean, the
Right.
comparison is off the charts. Like I think, and the way that you're fed things is really is faster, and like, and it's more deceptive, and there's more money to be made in views and sponsorships and things like that. So it's all gotten a little more nefarious. And yeah, I mean, I can only imagine, like, thankfully I did a lot of this work that I'm not as, you know, vulnerable to it, but still I do, of course.
Yeah.
It's so easy to compare,
Yeah.
and it's made to compare.
Yeah.
Like that's what I think we don't understand about social media. The point
Yeah.
is to compare.
Right. Right.
The point isn't to have community online. The it is to compare. It's built by people who understand data and the way
Yeah.
people, use these apps.
Yeah.
So it is very much built on the idea that someone will be on it more if they feel worse about themselves,
Yeah.
because they're going to be constantly looking for validation in the phone, in the app.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, we often really don't understand how powerful this is, and what it's, and how much it sort of can hijack our brain. Like I'm sure
Yeah.
it's, especially TikTok, it's like this is like how they could brain, like you can, the fast images,
Yeah.
it gets in your head really easily. So yeah, I mean, I would love if I could do like an updated version of Radically Content,
Yeah.
where I'm like, social media part 2. Since I last spoke to you all, here's where we're at now.
Yeah. And I worry that the idea of I'll be happy when has turned into a fear of I'll never be happy, because there's so much on social media that feels unattainable. And a large portion of the clients I see are adolescents and young adults.
Wow.
And um, social media, especially TikTok, comes up all the time. And there are so many people who have talked about TikToks of like what I eat in a day. And people will say to me, like, I can't eat, I can't eat that much and look like that person does and feel just like completely, um, you know, worthless because of that, and not being able to contextualize that that's not the whole picture, that a lot of these people work out several hours a day, that this is their job, right? Like that their social media doesn't provide the context. And I think, this question of I'll be happy with, that is so powerful, that resonates with so many people. I fear maybe I'm just being too cynical, is starting to become farther and farther away of this idea of I'll be happy when it starts to feel like I'm not sure if I can. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you make a good point, because I feel, as you were saying that, I'm thinking like, this idea that people are very sort of addicted to the I'll be happy win, to this future version. I almost feel like that's being weaponized against us on social
Yeah.
media now, because that's what's being sold.
Yeah.
More, it used to be magazines, okay? We could, and the thing with magazines is, you could opt into it. Like, you want to pick up a magazine, there's probably like, 10, 20 years ago, you pick up a 17 magazine or a Cosmo, there's going to be some shaming in there for the most part. That's what it was built on. That's what got people to buy it. Here's 5 things you're doing wrong. Okay. Well, but you bought it and you opted into reading that. Versus social media is now co-opting all that language that used to shame, especially women, all of that. And then they're telling us, no, they all lied to you. I am happier this way. So you need to do this, 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 and this, or you're never going to be happy. So follow me and follow along. And that is working to a degree that is scary.
Yeah.
Because that promise of, basically, it's the oldest trick in the book. It's the give someone a problem that you can solve. And right now, all I see, so much of what I see on TikTok is just giving women problems.
Yeah.
I mean, all these things, like what was coming up? It was like, if you have all these things of like, if you have like a gap, if your thigh is like a something, I can't keep up with the terms, but there's terms, like they'll come up every other week with like a term. And if you don't have that body structure or that face or that thing, then you're out, And I was reading a book about, young adolescents, but especially like girls in their 18 and up, that social being ostracized socially is akin to like death to them, like it biologically, that it's so hard to feel ostracized. And this is what it's doing. It's weaponizing that feeling of ostracizing people, because it's so lucrative and it's fueling engagement. Maybe it's not even that lucrative. I just think we're at a point where so many people are so addicted to engagement that they'll take any kind of engagement. Yeah. That is akin to worth now. Right. Engagement is worth in a way that's probably exacerbated over the years. That's kind of, people have always had that validation since the like button and, all of this, but I think that's almost like, that is everything. Right. Like if you go viral, that is ultimate worth. Right. And it's like, we're in a time where that looks like I know people who, they're the big people on TikTok. And it is not what it seems. And that's the nature of social media. And so, I think this idea that I'll never be happy because, so it's not I'll be happy when anymore. That's the point you're making. And I agree. It's I'll never be happy because, and wow, I don't know what's worse. I mean, maybe that one is probably worse, because that's that hopeless feeling.
Yeah. And I mean, you make the point that social media, and I like this doesn't need to just be a whole conversation bashing social media, but I do think it's important to talk about is that it's this false sense of connection and community. And yet so many people feel ostracized from it. And there's this statistic, and it's probably updated since I last saw it, that chronic loneliness is deadlier than smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. And so it's this false sense of join this community, follow me, feel like you're part of my life, that often leads people feeling like they're not a part of any in group, that they don't fit in anywhere, and leads them to feel worse. And so it's I don't know.
And it's like normalized though. That
Totally.
kind of chronic
Totally.
loneliness, people wouldn't call it that.
Right.
But it's so normalized for people to be doing TikToks in their room by
Yeah.
themselves. And I'm like, I remember, I mean, not to be like in my day, but like in my day, you were never in your room by
Right.
yourself. You were hanging out with your friends every
Yeah.
day, all the time. And I'm like, that's sad to me that now we have actually normalized that, like, you're alone and like your phone. Someone was telling me that, like, people who spend so much time online, they think that that's their real life, and real life is like what they like, that's online, almost like it's switched. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
but I agree. I mean, I do like social media. I can see the pros and
Right.
the cons. I'm not saying that it's all bad,
Not all
because
bad.
you really can reach people.
Yeah.
And there's really an incredible amount of resources out there now. But with that does come with the fact that, like, now there's so much information. Now there's almost too much information. Now people are like pathologizing
Yeah.
themselves and all of this, like therapy speak. And there's a lot of things. So it's like, with this comes with some, with the pros comes the cons.
Yeah.
But I do think that, it is really, really tough nowadays. If we're talking about radical contentment, if we're talking about how to be happy, how to be content, how to live a life of meaning and purpose and joy, it's really hard to talk about that without talking about social media.
Yeah.
And the way that it has impacted our mental health on a scale that is truly, I mean, unprecedented,
Yeah.
And so it is true. It's not like, it's hard to say that that's not a factor when it really, really is, when it is impacting our view of the world, our view of ourselves, how we see ourselves and value ourselves. Like, this has actually fundamentally changed how we're seeing and interacting with the world. And so, yeah, it is really tough to say that it wouldn't be a complete conversation then, because social media in one way or another is impacting, so many people, millions and millions of people. And many would cite it as part of the reason that they don't, feel as good about themselves as they want to feel, because at the end of the day, that's what it is. Like,
Right.
we do the things, we want the achievements, we want certain things to feel good about ourselves,
Right.
and to feel safe in our life and to feel worthy. There's really, it does come down to that, to feel loved, to feel adored, to feel this, all these natural instincts that we have. We are now sometimes not getting those in the places that feel real anymore.
Yeah.
And so, of course, that's going to impact our health and our mental health. And so it is really tough to have that conversation. And it is really important to understand how this is touching our lives, because I think, I started talking about social media, and I know people do too. And in no way do I think I'm ever like the only person talking about things. I'm just saying that, starting that conversation on social media, and because I just was like, we have to be able to hold both at the same time. That, like, this is a great tool. I'm glad I get to talk to all these people. Without this, I wouldn't have a voice in this way. But we also need to understand how this is impacting our health, because I often think some people don't actually notice it. And it's running, kind of like in the background. And
Yeah.
I'm like, it's not the same as like watching TV or watching a
Right.
show. Like it's designed totally differently. It interrupts a part of our brain that's completely different. And that's not even, I'm sure you know so much more about that than I do because you've studied the brain, studied
Right.
this. But this is just from my own personal experience of noticing, I'm like, I don't feel the same way
No.
after a scroll session
Right.
than I do just like watching TV. It's a
Right.
lot gentler.
And and people have sometimes said to me, well, before social media, people watch reality TV. Isn't that the same? And I don't think it's similar at all.
Mm-mm.
Because I think it's the same thing of like when you turn on a TV show, you're watching a produced TV show. And when people are lying in bed or out in public and just scrolling, they're just accepting it as it is and it's going anywhere with them. It's not, I'm sitting on my couch watching this, and so I think it's completely different.
Yeah,
um
exactly. Yeah.
when you talk about too, so many people wrote in about how they appreciate that you encourage people to rethink what the term self-care means, and that you talk about how self-care in American society is kind of like a capitalist term. It's all
Mm-hmm.
about consumerism. And people talk about, I'm going to have a self-care day and go to a spa, which is great. Like if that relaxes you, that's great. But you shouldn't need to have a self-care day, because self-care should be happening on a daily basis and is not about pampering yourself. And it's about unlearning. It's self-care is doing the hard work, and I think that that's something that resonates with people. One other thing that really, really resonated with people, and I was excited that it was something that I had, highlighted as well. A lot of people wrote in about the distinction you make between settling and settling
Mm.
in. And someone wrote in asking if you think there are times when people really are settling, and how we can tell that difference between like settling and simply finding peace with where we are.
Mm. That's a great question. To think about that for a second. I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is the first word that jumped in my head was justification. So
Yeah.
settling requires a lot of justification. So if you have to make something smaller that's important to you in order to have what you have, that might
Yeah.
be settling. I think when you have to, I also, actually, as I'm thinking about it, and I think I did write about this in Radically Content, that a lot of people, um, they feel a sense of settling when they've done something against what it feels authentic to them. Because so often we're fed this idea of like, here's what success is, here's what life, here's your path, here's what you
Yeah.
should do. You check the things off. And if you don't interrogate that at some point, if you never ask yourself, well, what do I want? What is actually important to me?
Yeah.
Then if you get in a life that is just checking those boxes, and those aren't your boxes that you care about,
Yeah.
that's going to feel like settling. That's actually something to look at. It doesn't mean, burn everything down. It could just mean recalibrate in a different direction, or add something in that feels authentic that might change the entire trajectory of that feeling,
Yeah.
or it could mean, I don't know, got to change everything. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I do think that because society right now is so prescriptive about what is supposed to make you happy, and it really benefits capitalism in I think we're getting on to that.
Yeah.
We're starting to see that, and it's not benefiting us, it's benefiting a few. Once we see that, I think, because it is so prescriptive, because there's so many things that they tell you, it goes back to all be happy when, if you get this,
Right.
and this. And if you go into that, like, so many people are thinking that is the way, they're like, oh, here's the guide. And
Right.
for some people, maybe that really does make them happy. They want to follow the exact prescription. And I believe that, and here's the thing that I think gets left out of almost every conversation, especially when it comes to self-help, is that we're all different. We're
Right.
not all supposed to want the same
Right.
things. So how can there be a prescriptive way of living if we're all different? Not
Yeah.
everybody wants to get married. Not everybody wants a career that has purpose and meaning. Some people just want to,
Right.
make money to give to their life and hobbies, and they just want to live in a different way. Everybody is different, and if we're not allowing ourselves to be different, to break out of those boxes, to not just take the list as it is,
Right.
to at least sit down and look at it and go, does this make me happy? Does this excite me? This is my life. It's my life. I get to decide. It's not my parents' life. It's not my family's life. It's not this person's life. It's not society's life. I got to live with my decisions. I think that's how you avoid the
Yeah.
settling. And if you've had that conversation with yourself and you're in a life that feels good, but some days it has that tedium, it has that monotony, then that's the settling in,
Yeah.
and you can create moments of, excitement and joy and all the things, but it's very hard to do if you're mistaking that feeling for settling, because then you're in the spiral of, I've
Yeah.
settled, this isn't good enough, this is this, instead of noticing that it's just the regular sort of normal cycle of what it feels like to settle in and actually like be in your life without trying to constantly better it or
Yeah.
this or that, or think about it and overthink it. And so to me, yeah, that would be, and of course it's going to look different for everyone. That's what's tough. Like I think the part about radically content, if I to write it as authentically as I could, it was leaving a lot of things open-ended.
Yeah.
It's like what looks like settling to me is not going to look like that to you.
Totally. And
What looks like, and
yeah.
like what looks like settling in for me is not going to look like that to you or to this or this, that. Like there shouldn't be any blueprint. We can look at people and maybe it'll give us insight. Oh, that looks like something I'd enjoy. Or even the envy. You're like, I want that. Do I really want that? Yeah, I think I do. Or no, I just think I want that. All of it can be clues and all of it can be insight. But when we don't know ourselves and we're not taking the time to get to know ourselves, that's when I think we end up in the life and we wake up one day and go, how did I get here? And it's like, this is an avoidable thing, because at any point you can sit down and get in relationship with yourself. Because to me, I think going back to self-care, self-love, self-trust, that is the ultimate love, is knowing yourself and being in a relationship with yourself and checking in, like that feels like love to me. Someone checking in on me. Why wouldn't I then do that to myself? Like everything that I want from someone else, I should be giving to myself too. And I'm allowed to want it from other people, but I also need to have it from myself too. And so, I think all of that comes down to, that's why, talking about self-care for a second, I don't like that it's become so commercialized, because I'm like, it's so simple. Caring for yourself, it means like check in with yourself, ask yourself how you're doing.
Right.
How are you? Stop for a minute. Like, don't we love that when someone we love stops and goes, hey, how are you really? How are you for real? Let's talk for real. That feels like love. It doesn't have to be an expensive day.
Yeah.
I mean, if that expensive day leads you to those questions, great. But if it leads to more avoidance of those questions, I don't think that's care.
Totally. And I think there were two things that came to mind as you were speaking. I think the first is, and you touched on this, that it's not really other people's place to say when people are settling, right? Like she settled for that job, he settled for that relationship. Settling and settling in looks different for different people. And I think that it's like this toxic language that we use when we decide what is settling for someone else. I think the other thing that you talk about, and I won't go into too much depth about it because I'm mindful of time, is timelines. And these prescribed timelines, especially for women, in society of you should be married by this age, you should have children by, like, there's these um like somewhat arbitrary timelines. And obviously, like, for people who want children, there might be like biological factors to it, but also not every woman wants to have a child. And so there's this, like, this timeline and these expectations. And so I think that puts so much undue pressure on people and makes them feel like, I won't be happy unless, right? So it's another iteration of I'll be happy when, and it's I won't be happy unless I get married. I won't be happy unless. And so they feel pressured to enter into relationships or situations because of the societal pressure, that they're feeling.
Well, I think a good way to look at it is, and this isn't something I wrote, but I'd love to add it in if I ever could, is like, you ever notice with women, these timelines are so threatening? They're always like a threat. They're like, well, if you don't get this by this, you might end up.
Right.
They never say that about men.
Yep.
Ever.
Yeah.
So when there is a threat against a woman, we always have to interrogate why.
Yeah.
Why do they care so much? What is this amorphous blob of opinions? What is the value to them of me getting married by a certain time, or of me thinking that my value somehow just uses up by a certain point?
Yeah.
Like, that I have to have this and this and this to be fulfilled. Who is that fulfilling actually?
Right.
Who is that coming from, and who is prescribing it?
Yeah.
Because when something is for your well-being, why would it have to be a threat?
Yeah.
Like, if
Totally.
I wanted, if it was supposed to make me happy, and why would I have to be threatened into doing it? So that's just a good way of kind of, what I love to give people are, first, reframes, because it's so important. Second, freedom to just interrogate these things. And two, different ways to recognize when you're in it, like, so when you feel like something you have to do is you're threatened into it.
Yeah.
Walk away.
Yeah.
Because that's not really to your benefit. Because when have you ever had to do something that makes you feel good, something that brings joy and happiness to your life? When have you ever had to be threatened into doing it?
Yeah.
So there's the,
totally.
And it's like, the thing is that, like you said, it's just different for everyone.
Yeah.
And so I never want to say it's this and it's this and it's this, because then it's like, then you give someone another thing to feel threatened by. And so it's like, for some people, they might find ultimate joy and happiness getting married at 22. How do I know?
Right.
Some people, they don't get married till they're 44, and they're like, this was the perfect timing for me. How can we make sense of that? And then threatening people with timelines that are very arbitrary, that are very threatening, that are very shaming. So that's what I always like to do, because, some people, I know they've said about Radically Content, they wanted something more concrete. They wanted like answers. And I'm like, I don't have them.
It's not a one size fits all.
Yeah. No? I'm like, sorry, I don't have them for you. I have my own answers, based on this inquiry and self-analyzing and these hard questions I ask myself. But I wouldn't be good at what I do. And I wouldn't be doing you a service if I said I knew for your life. Yeah. And that's the hard part, like, I think that's the tricky work, is having the courage to say, this society, some pieces might work for me and some pieces might not. And I got to know me, and then actually doing the things that are authentic to you. I mean, it's tough for a reason. No one's going to say that it's easy, but I think that's the valuable work. And that's the message I always want to send with my work, is like, it's not prescriptive. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I believe in you. I believe that you can figure these things out for yourself, and that the whole point of life is for you to figure these out and to know yourself and to integrate that with other relationships and to to find peace in being exactly who you are, not who society tells you to be. And I think that's the work of our lives, because we get put into this world and given a list, and we get socialized into being a certain person that might not even be who we truly are. And when we get to meet who we truly are, you know, we have to guide that person through life. So I think, you know, that to me is what Radically Content is about. It's not really about being in ecstasy joy all the time. It's just about constantly being in conversation with yourself and treating yourself with care and respect the way that you deserve.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. For people who loved Radically Content and want to consume more of what you write, who want to read your novels and everything like that, can you share what you have coming up, what else they can find, and where they can find it?
Yeah, of course. So the novel that I had come out in 2023 is Main Character Energy. This one, I would say, you know, it explores self-doubt and creativity, and a woman who is truly about to give up on herself and her life, and she gets thrown a lifeline, and she has to learn how to accept it. And the next novel that's coming out is Charlie Quinn Let's Go. And this is about a woman who is truly just, she really does think there is a prescription to happiness in life. And she followed it, and then it all fell apart. And now she's like, uh-oh, but I wasn't even really that happy before either. And so if you're a workaholic, if you're dealing with the disillusionment of the pandemic, if you're a millennial who is in that, like, what is going on with my life and what is life, this one's going to resonate. And so I'm really excited about that one, because, you know, my novels, they're obviously novels, they're fiction. But something I always do in my work is I'm going to infuse it with self-growth, with lessons. That's the character arc. To me, that's everyone's character arc. And then there's, you know, life that happens, but you're always on this self-growth journey. So I think of them, one of my friends said it was like self-help, but like as a novel. Yeah. I'm like, you know what? I like that.
It's a good
I think
combination.
Yeah, I'm into that. Like, it's almost like you get to follow the journey instead of kind of being told what the journey is. So yeah, that one comes out September 30th, and, you know, pre-orders are everything to an author. So please grab it from your favorite retailer early, if you can. If not, Pub Week is the best time to do it. It really means a lot. And, you know, that's a very important time for an author. So, and I got a lot of novels in me, so I got to keep writing them. And, you know, nonfiction, I always feel like one day I'll write my own, like, version of Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. So I'm sure that's always percolating in the background. But yeah, I mean, if you love Radically Content, you're going to love Main Character Energy. You're going to love Charlie Quinn Let's Go. They're that, like, positive, hopeful journey, you know, that people who read self-help and something like Radically Content, they're on that journey. They know that life. So I think that they'll resonate for sure.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us. I know people are gonna love, you know, this discussion, and, you know, just as much as they loved the book, and really the raw honesty that you brought is so special, and I know make a lot of people feel much less alone. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And you know what? DM me or email me or something and let me know what you think, because I'm there, and I love to hear feedback, especially for something like this, because it means a lot to me that this book was chosen and that you've all read it, and, you know, it's so much has resonated. Like, that's everything. That's why I write. So thank you for this.
Of course. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.